felt like there were points when Katie was talking that were maybe a little boring. She said her hand went up. Or like, that's okay, and that's not because Katie was doing anything that was Katie. She was doing something that we had asked her to do to prove a point, I guess. Were there any things that happened, any stations that happened where you were like really feeling like this is exciting and I'm learning all kinds of things, or just like I'm excited and I'm really invested? What happened for you, Gina? What you
All
think?
of it.
You're always excited about it.
That's why I'm going to us.
There you go. There you go. Right? Okay, so anything more specific like that you feel like you could attribute to your investment being there?
I really liked searching for the things and trying to make it look exactly, trying to remember what it looked like on your thing and shit. Trying to find them all. And then I really liked playing the game.
Yeah, totally. What about you?
So when we were getting ready to play the game and he was putting on all of this stuff, like it made me really want to listen to like what he was saying, like when are we gonna be told to put the weird stuff on the face? So I was actually paying attention to like him just placing the black on his face and I was like, he put in should I no? He didn't tell me to yet, but maybe really listen to what he was saying.
You're a good kid. You're like the camper that everybody's like wanting. Waiting to be told. That's really cool.
So when most of the activities, I can just totally imagine my two kids who are 7 and 9 just getting into it, which was very cool. Like that the memory game, I thought yeah they would really get into that, having to search for those items, and then the bird calls. I've done a sound map with them. That's one of the very few times that they've actually settled down and been quiet and done something. And then the cougar deer game, they'd be all over it. But my daughter would be like, she wouldn't pay any attention to the instructions because she would have been all into the stuff. And she would have no idea how to play the game.
So raise your hand if you thought you had some fun in what was happening. Or raise your hand if you would rather have been listening to a PowerPoint. I'm itching my nose, don't get confused.
I'm doing the PowerPoint next.
We only have 6 slides.
Well, I knew that Katie was supposed to give what she said a boring lecture. I thought it was fascinating.
She tried.
She's too good.
Raise your hand if you think you learned something during that. Okay, raise your hand if you think you learned something that someone was like telling you directly. Do you know what I mean? Like someone was like, here's this thing and I'm going to tell you, and you were like, oh, and I learned this and I'm going to remember that. What about if you learned something that was maybe like an indirect kind of thing, like that wasn't the point, but that there was other things happening in the background. There were like maybe sneaky lessons happening in there at the same time. I think for sure sometimes for me too. But like there was something you're like, I don't quite know, but I think something's happening right now. But I mean, raise your hand if you were confused at any point. Like, what is going on? Like this is kind of mysterious. So welcome to the world of Coyote mentoring. Anyone have an idea of what the point was for having 4 stations? Like what was the theme that was happening?
Different learning styles.
And the corresponding different teaching styles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, but they're we have both because of both reasons, right? So for sure. So let's break it down in just a little bit for those different stations. And let's totally start with Katie's station. Do you want to come up and just talk about a second for what you were trying to do and what you think that you were like getting out of that? Like what was the point of what you were demonstrating? Yeah, cool, whatever.
I'll let you stand and you'll be on the camera.
Oh. So yes, so they asked me to do a little lecture on bird language, and who was my first one? That was where I was like, okay, Gwen told me to say, don't ask any questions. Hold your questions. And I was trying to do that, and I couldn't do it. So I think the other 3 were a little bit more just like I filled the time feel like there were probably a lot of knowledge already in the room, and I would have been like the keeper of all of that knowledge. And that was sort of what I was doing, was like, here's all the stuff that I wanted, that I felt like I should know.
Awesome. So you can use that. So does that work for you guys? How many of you went to schools where that was like the normal form of learning? Or teach at schools where that's the normal form of learning? It's like, I know everything, and you know nothing, and I'm going to tell you all of these things, and you're going to learn all of these things. That worked for me actually pretty well in a lot of ways. I can do that. I can learn things that way. I personally don't think it's as much fun, and I don't tend to remember it as long as when I do it in other ways. So that was the didactic kind
And then
of.
sometimes there's a great use for that too, right? So it's like,
For
here's the
sure.
thing that I'm gonna give you, and then we're gonna go and do the next.
For sure. And then you can do lots of variations. So we had talked for a while about doing like the more really dry, boring, shush kind of thing, and then like making it more interesting within that lecture. Because it's the reason that people teach that way a lot is it's easy. You can put a lot of people in a room. There's a lot information that makes sense to get across that way when you really are the person that knows a lot of things. Sometimes that can work really well. Especially if you do things like adding in the think, pair, share, stuff like that. If you came to camp and that was your 8-hour day or your 7-hour day with those kids, do you think that's what the kids are going to be excited about? Like, of course not. They're not going to be happy. They're not going to get very much out of it. But for up to, how long was that, 20 minutes? How does your attention stay for 20 minutes? Mine probably wouldn't have. I could probably be there for 15, and then I would drift, and then I would come back, and then I would drift. And I'm an adult, and I really think birds are cool, and I would still be like watching the birds in the middle of it, you know. I think where's Michaela? Yeah, go. So what were you doing? What was the intention of your?
Storytelling.
Yeah. And what was your story? I didn't go around. So what's the recap?
I told a story of why I love being in nature, starting with when I was 3 and catching snakes, going into when I was 5, and my mom mentoring me to find worms, and going exploring around my neighborhood.
So if you take a second and just think in your mind of like how many details you can remember from what Michaela said. Like, can you remember any of it? Like the ages, or like where she was from, or like you have pictures in your brain? Now think about what Katie was saying. For the how many bird languages are there?
5.
Can anyone list all 5 of them?
Call, alarm, companionship, male aggression, juvenile.
Now see if you could do that again tomorrow. So good job. But like, even that I think is really hard. So if you are doing something where you have information and you want to tell somebody else, it can be really useful to not just be like this, and this, but to put in that story. So any places where you can put the story in. So Erin's story from this morning, can you remember details from that story? Probably, still. I sure can. We've evolved growing up like as our species and our lives with stories, right? So when you can put any information you want to share into a story, you're probably going to have a really good outcome. Maybe you should go last.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just even trickier. Okay, so my station, we did plants, and you had to go out and find these plants and come back and figure out what was going on. Do you have an idea what the point of that was? It wasn't actually the plant part.
It's a match.
Not even that. Not even that.
Memory.
Not even that. Huh? The questions. So the whole thing was an exercise with the activity being the focal point to do that, but in having an opportunity to like look at things and go deeper. Because if you went out with a group of kids, I think, and you're like, there's this plant, I'm going to tell you this, and there's this plant, I'm going to tell you this, you're missing that like curiosity piece, that hook. So with something like that, you're giving them something that's like, I can make this kind of competitive, I can make this like kind of a running around thing, and then you can like pull at the curiosity. I didn't know all the answers, but you have a chance to like get into that. There's 3 different levels of questioning that we kind of lay out in this little Coyote page that's in your manual, if that helps. And if your teacher, if you've been where there's something you can answer, like how many petals are on this flower, or what looks different about this one than this one. Anyone can answer it. Kids are going to be psyched. They have an answer. They're ready to do it. Level 2 questions, you probably have to look more. Like, does this plant grow all around sunburn, or where else can you see it? Or what family is this plant from? Something you could probably look up pretty easily. Level 3 questions are things that you could even maybe write a PhD dissertation about, like the whys and the hows, and really might be something that doesn't get answered. Like I wonder kinds of questions. But to keep that curiosity going, because if you only are ever saying like, what is this, what is that, that doesn't really capture like the magical pieces. You want to have the kids walk away not knowing everything. So it's okay to not know answers. It's okay to not even give them answers if you know them. So there was plant things I could have told you a lot more and sat there being like, this is this, this is this, I'm going to tell you this, I'm going to tell you this. And I think it would have robbed your experience of being able to come back and show what you found. Like, I found these things. What was my experience? Here's what I'm curious about. And to let those questions sort of direct the conversation instead of just being like, this is this, this is this, this is that. You know what I mean? So that was trying to show you the skills of questioning and then you.
Alright, so my station was the game station. I was trying to represent the Trickster Transformer, which this kind of whole 4-station activity was also doing. And so the things I was demonstrating was, for one, we played a game, which is a great game to use at summer camp, which is awesome. And then there were a couple other things that were present in the station. And one, I only got like one of you to jump in and put some face paint on. And I was really specifically trying not to tell you to do it. I was just kind of seeing who would do it. And one of the group's Carrie, she had noticed, she had the observation that was an invitation to put on some face paint. And the way that's a Trickster Transformer idea is like putting on a mask, and like maybe you guys noticed this when we were wearing costumes earlier and doing our little skits. That like putting on a mask like totally changes your perception of who you are, what you can do, like your confidence, all that stuff. So that's a really cool like thing to do with either like skits or just like smearing mud on your face. That's allowed. Look at your manual. It's allowed some places. And then one of the other elements was the sprint to the game site, which not everybody did again. That's okay. Like kids tend to be a lot more willing to sprint to places sometimes. But that's like. But the sprint to the game site is like, it's like energy and like getting them there, and then they get there, they're excited, and sometimes they don't even know why, but they're like, yeah, let's do whatever we're supposed to do now. And it's like it's like a thing that kids just love to do, and like just run somewhere and then do something. Really get excited about it. And the last part was at the end when we were doing the debrief. Does anybody know how many statements did I make while I was doing the debrief with you guys? Anybody? Yeah. Anybody? So yeah. So that whole time, I only asked you questions. All the information that you got, the strategies to play that game, or what not to do, what to do, came from like me just asking guided questions, and you guys sharing the information with each other. So that was all just questions. And then I guess the last part of that was I sort of got to this at the end, but the awareness piece of all the bird language. You come from the bird language station and like to the game station. And it's just sort of one of those reminders to like keep that awareness, because you might be able to have one of those serendipitous experiences we talked about earlier, where, you know, the kids are playing the game, but you can notice that thing out of the corner of your eye, that, you know, the fox trotting down the ridge, and, you know, be like, wow, check out this, everybody. So that's the trickster transformer piece.
Maintaining your connection to nature and your awareness, regardless of what else is going on. So like, it's a really cool skill to work on.
And I'm a mess now, I'm sure. That was all blind putting on makeup, so.
Yeah. So we have the 4 stations, we have the like, didactic structure, the questioning, the storytelling, and the trickster transformer. And turn it over to Erin for the
PowerPoint.
why this was all, I don't know.
I have one thing I want to follow up with going about your awareness of nature. If you're out in the field, don't worry about a kid interrupting and saying, oh, what's that hawk or something, because you want to take advantage. That's a teachable moment to be interrupted from whatever you're doing because something better is happening, and it is a teachable moment. So
For real.
always pick up on that.
Okay, so can't be a teacher training without PowerPoint, right? But really, it's just really mostly more the images and the words that I want you to see, and I wanted to connect sort of what we've been doing and what we're trying to have you leave with our mission and what we as an organization are doing. So, Thorne's mission is to build earth stewardship by connecting youth to nature through joyful, hands-on, place-based environmental education experiences. And this is something that you should think about every time when you're thinking about your lesson plans or you're thinking about your camp. This is what we do. Okay, so if it's anything that doesn't have to do with this, if you're teaching about the rainforest in Ecuador, you're missing our mission. Okay, it's place-based, it's hands-on, it's joyful, and the hope is that that will give people a sense of stewardship. So to break it down further, we have an educational philosophy. This is all in your binder. So Thorne's programs are really encourage hands-on learning. We know that this is how kids learn, right? This is why you're teaching at Thorne. But if you are immersed in it, if you're running around, if you're tasting something, touching something, you're gonna remember it. And I mean, I know that's how I learn, and that's the way that we want to teach here. We also teach place-based education, and it's not just about learning about what's around you, but I think for us it's also if you connect to the places that you're experiencing in summer camp, you're going to want to go back there. And I know at the end of camps that I've taught, the kids are like, where are we? Where is this place? Like, I want to come back here. And I want to, especially at Littleton, kids just want to be there. And that kind of, if they're having these moments that they're coming back to a place over and over again, that's going to create that sense of place. And we know that sense of place creates stewardship. But really what I want to focus on right now is that Thorne provides joyful education experiences. I think this is a really cool part of our mission, that it's not just about science, it's about a joyful experience. And everything we do here brings us into we think that if you're having fun, if you're playing a game, you're learning. If you're running around looking for plants, like, I mean, I learned a ton in the last 2 hours because of that. And so every single thing that you do at camp should have that fun element. And yes, there should be some learning, and there might be moments of having a didactic lecture type of thing, but everything that you do should be all about having fun. And we want the kids to walk away at the end of camp with a big smile on their faces. So what I want to do now is for you to sort of think back to your own childhood. And
I used to, when I was little, love going out in the rain, and I'd find water was running down the road, and I'd make a dam and make it go around. Learning the physics of water, really just playing.
Yeah.
I think for me, like exploration, encountering the unknown, whether it was rafting or hiking, just what's around the next minute.
Just around the river.
Just climbing things like trees and exploring that way.
Reading and hearing stories.
Building, constructing.
Jake.
Looking for bugs.
Looking for them or actually catching them?
Looking for bugs under logs and rocks.
Just running as fast as I can.
Collecting treasures like rocks and feathers.
Is this okay?
Oh, yeah.
I like collecting the little catkins off of the pine trees and rolling them in my fingers until the little balls filled off, and then I would make like little designs on the concrete.
Which part of your catkins?
Yeah, just pile them up. Keep like protect that.
Like, as me gardening, like I had my own little garden, but going back to the field, I was talking about role playing, but it was a secret garden. And I made it that much cooler, so the garden, kind of role playing, mysterious things, yeah.
We used to have a nature trail when I was in third grade behind our house that was eventually bulldozed to make houses, but we loved to walk on that.
What did you like to do? Why did you like to
And just
do it?
you're in a forest walking on a trail and there's just, you're in a, I guess just in that enclosed space. Just that made you feel like you're more outdoor, opposed to being in our neighborhood that was houses lined up.
Did you have something?
Yeah, I just love swimming. Like I still am, but I just in the water. It's like
Maybe?
Finding any pet or insect or snake or anything and making it my pet for the day.
Doing what was the end of that?
Should make just pet for the day.
Ah.
I like dancing in the rain, and I can totally picture that.
Oh, I love dancing in the rain stuff.
Wait, see that?
I like finding animals and then building like a house for them, like find frogs that are fun with them, like a little shelter. Even though they obviously live on my head.
Just making up stories with the objects around me.
So you would make up stories?
Yes.
Awesome. Mike?
Riding my bike, just going for hours, seeing how far I could go.
Building fairy houses.
I still like doing that.
I know.
Finding berries and stuff.
I liked walking down our dirt road to the little bridge and dropping sticks in on one side and then running to the other side.
when you are thinking about your own camps, we want you to think about the lens of what is a children's passion.
I have one more on the list because I can't
Yeah.
remember now. I think the extractive things, the like, how many people killed things when they were kids? Yeah. I mean, some of the birds are stuffed from when Oak killed these actual birds, right? Was it one of these one that you shot when you were a kid?
The duck caps
Out there, when you were like 10?
Yeah.
Like part of, like, because you're kind of extracting things when you're a kid can be the thing that turns you into a conservationist when you're an adult. That's the guess.
Funding.
Yeah. You know, that poor bug, but yeah, it's part of our exploration.
So, children's passions defines the things children worldwide love to do, no matter what their cultural background. They are those universal aspects of the childhood experience that bring children so much happiness in life. So to bring joy in your programs, what we need to do is we need to start with children's passions and what they love to do. And I just love these quotes, so does somebody else want to read one of them? Oh, sorry, please.
Knowledge without love will not stick, but if love comes first, knowledge is sure to follow.
What's the other one?
If we want children to flourish, to become truly empowered, let us allow them to love the earth before we ask them to save it.
That's your job. Lisa.
Just how
Huh, that's weird. Interesting. Okay. Well, luckily I have a handout for the next thing. And I think if we had more time, we could actually create another list and think about what, what are the kinds of things that you are hoping kids will learn in Thorne summer camp. So those are a little bit different. This is like what kids love to do, but in a way, I mean, you could play Duck, Duck, Goose all day long and they might love it, but it's still not getting at what we want to do at Thorne, right? So we have our own sort of learning objectives. We want kids to learn how to build a shelter, or we want kids to learn some names of birds, or learn some bird calls. So there's some actual knowledge that we want them to walk away with as well. Some of them are more like skills, like we want them to know how to use a net and find macroinvertebrates. That's not something that kids necessarily know how to do before they come to Thorne camp. So I put together this little Venn diagram. It's really a lot different with all the kids. You guys print this out. Let me know if you need more. So I think this is kind of, the Venn diagram brings together the two different sides. And the question, I guess, for us when we think about planning our camps is how can we bring children's passions into everything that we do, right? So if we want to be teaching about the water cycle, how can you think about that in a way that brings in children's passions? And, I believe that you can actually teach every single thing through a children's passion. If you want to teach the water cycle, you can play a game where they start to, cycle through something. And that is what's going to stick with them more than if you lecture to them. If you want to teach about adaptation, side of these. You can play Duck Duck Goose all day and the kids are gonna have fun, or you can teach about the water cycle and they may learn something, but if you can bring them together, that's where that nature connection happens. It's the intersection between the two of those things. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yep. Please. So to me, there's two big things I want to add, which is that we call this children's passions, but we don't really mean that. We mean human passions, and it's more obvious in kids. But I don't think there's a single person here that if we were like, I'm going to pay you enough money to live and you could do this list all day long for the rest of your life, it wouldn't be like, yes, please. You know what I mean? Like, this is the kind of stuff that people love to do. It's not just kids. So when you're doing this, it's not just for the kids. And I'm all about it being for the kids, and I'm all about it being for you and for me as a teacher. Because if I'm not having fun, they're not having fun. If they're not having fun, they're not learning. That's not always true in all situations, but I do think that is true when the thing we want them to learn is a love for nature. You cannot learn a love for nature, I don't think, unless you're having fun. I don't think you can pull those apart. And that works for all those levels. So think about them again as human passions, not only children's passions for your own sake. And I think that's why it was important to play the games that you played and to actually do the things that you were doing and to get your own face messy and think about the stories and be a participant in all of this stuff so you are in love with your job. If you're not in love with your job every day that you're going to teach these kids, they'll know. You know that they'll know, right? Like, we're into that. So the more of this kind of stuff you can do, and if you're like, I'm just not having fun right now, that should be your first warning that something's about to go wrong and the shit's gonna hit the fan. Like, that's when that meltdown's gonna happen. If you're not having fun, it's not adding up together. And then the other thing was to bring back the coyote piece. You guys know anything about coyotes and what role they play in like Native American mythologies? Yeah, so that there's a reason that it's called coyote mentioning it is for that reason of being inobvious and not always saying, here's what we're going to do, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, which is really clear and works really well, and that's what grown-ups like. I went to the workshop that I went to on coyote mentoring, and I was so frustrated for a while, because I was like, I don't know what's going on, and can you just like tell me, like, why won't anyone answer my questions? But it was because they wanted me to renew my own sense of curiosity, so I would go find the freaking book. If you cared about what that plant was, and you want to know, and you actually are interested in that, you don't need me to tell you. If I just tell you, you're probably not going to remember. We've had plenty of fights about this because he's my stinking boyfriend, and I'm like, what's that? And he's like, figure it out. And I'm like, I hate you. You know? We're grown-ups, and we want someone to tell us. But if you always get that answer, your curiosity stops being curious. Like, it doesn't, I think, that when it's just that straightforward and that easy, that you forget that you are an owner of your own relationship to nature. You forget that those books are there. But when you set somebody up and you're like, I don't know what that is. And maybe you do know. I lie to kids all the time. If you don't lie to kids, I'll teach you how. I love lying to kids. And I mean that with the most love in my heart. But I really do. I lie to kids all the time. Because I want them to still listen sometimes. I say completely ridiculous things. like what was this? It must be the unicorn. You know, that's a unicorn. And they're like, what? You know what I mean? But like, keep them thinking and keep them with you and keep them curious and not just telling them. So that's part of the coyote, deliberately not answering questions, deliberately not saying what's going on, and that's part of that mystery. If you just say, I want you to go out and find 10 plants and bring them back, it won't do the same thing as if you can code it into a game. It won't do the same thing if you're like, I want you to walk out there and sit in that spot till you figure out the meaning of life, or till you figure out what the birds are doing. It's not, you're going to lose them. You have to give them a mission that allows them a way everybody knows this that's ever done this. The difference for me of why this is so important is that there's a language behind it, so that when you're there and you're hanging out and watching these kids and you have your net and you're like, I am having so much fun, that you don't have that guilty voice in your brain. Because I don't know about you, but I get this, where I'm like, I should be teaching them something. I should be like working, but I'm just having fun. That's not okay. But like, if that's what you're doing, to me, you're doing it right. That's like the feeling that you want, like bursting from your heart all day long. And not all day long, because there's that whatever. But for the most chunk of all that time, like that's when you're doing it right. That's what I think.
And so with what Gwen said, you can't really get kids to learn unless you get them to love, or you can't get them to love nature unless you are having fun, is what you said, right?
Yeah, I agree.
And you can't get them to be steward unless they love nature. So that's really kind of how we see it all connecting together. And the thing that we want you to walk home with today is not, yes, we want you to know the policies. We want you to know what to do in case something happens in the field. We want you to feel like you're part of a community. But we want you to understand and feel inside your own heart that that connection between joy and a love of nature and stewardship, because that's where it's all sort of intersects for us. Just so you kind of know how we designed the day, it was really with this Coyote mentoring in mind the whole time, and we were trying to kind of trickster you into learning. And one of the things, I don't know if you mentioned right now, but that was really interesting. I'm just learning about Coyote mentoring as well, which is why I'm kind of looking at my notes a lot. I haven't been to one of the trainings, but as soon as Gwen came home from her training and she talked about it, I was like, this is it. This is what we've been missing. This is exactly it. And seriously, since then, I've been working on this training to make it as much about that as possible. And the one thing that I don't know if you mentioned was how it's about kind of finding edges. And he uses a lot of metaphors with coyotes, how they kind of bring you outside of the edge of a city or town. But really, that's a really neat part of this too, is like meeting kids where they are and then kind of pushing them a little bit beyond that. And I really felt that with Gwen's plant talk. Like I was like, yeah, okay, I know these are all plants, like that's an easy question. And then she asked a question, I was like, I don't know the answer to that. I really want to know now. And I think that's what we are starting to play with too, is like, how can you kind of push kids, but not so far that they're like, oh my gosh, I don't know, and it scares me. But like giving, he has almost like a formula for it, right? Like 70% like comfortable questioning, where they're just like, yeah, I feel good, I feel confident, and then kind of pushing the edge to like 15% is like in that level 2, and only 5% should be like the questions that really make them like think and wonder and go home and kind of sits with them for a while, and they may never know the answer to it. So just to take you through kind of the day again, we started with a story. That's a big part of Coyote mentoring. Instead of starting the day any other way, I wanted you guys to like get a feel for our roots and and also bring in a story about nature connection. In that story, I tried to embed some information, like the DDT or things about the way the peregrine falcon flies. And so that's the way you can actually get didactic information into teaching in a way that maybe sticks with kids a little bit more. And then the creation of the clans was also really intentional. And I think that's a great way to think about summer camp. You basically are a little clan.
amazing how much kids bond in a week, and especially if you are intentional about that. If you're creating opportunities for team building and you're doing things like the weather reports, or you're really intentional about that. I feel like when I used to teach, I would get really sad on Fridays. I was like Michaela, like, I'm gonna miss you so much. Like, you care about those kids, and they care about you, and they care about each other. And, that's a love in itself. And then with the role play, we were trying to dress up and have humor and just kind of trick you into learning the policies, I would say. And just by, I think, acting things out and like putting yourself there, if kids can do that, if they're in a situation where they can pretend to be an animal or become a tree, they connect to that in a deeper way. So those types of things were kind of embedded throughout. And then really we spent the afternoon just watching our nature mentors that are here, and how they could mentor those different ways of teaching. And Gwen sort of went over this, but I want to say again what I think nature mentors are. First of all, nature mentors love nature. If you love it and you demonstrate that, like what I'm saying, if you're out there, if you're teaching an experience about macroinvertebrates, if you're not out there in the water, scooping things up and being like, oh, look at that, look at what's happening, like you're not doing as much mentoring as you can. If you're not getting dirty with them, if you're not practicing your own awareness and asking those kinds of questions, you're not mentoring as good as you can. So I think being that nature lover yourself is key to being a nature mentor. Second, I think it's really important to pay attention to your mentees. And every kid's going to be different. You're going to have different kids throughout the summer, and they're all going to learn a little bit differently, but if you pay attention and you know, like, oh, this one really likes to sit quietly and journal, and this one is running around, and that's where they are learning best. So watching those kids and asking those questions of yourself, like, what kind of style of learning do they like? And then using that to kind of leverage learning. I think that is where you can, so maybe not every single kid likes to climb trees, but and you actually can't climb trees, that's a bad example. But, I think not every single kid's gonna love all of these, but if you can figure out which kids like certain things, you're gonna give them that passion, and that's what's gonna make you a better mentor. And then finally, and Gwen talked about this already, but nature mentors are really active listeners and active questioners. I know when Katie was talking, I wanted to both ask questions, and I felt like there wasn't a lot of room for that, and I knew she was intentionally doing that, but I felt it. And then there was times where I wanted to say, like, I want to tell you about this time that I heard a bird, and there wasn't an opportunity for that, and I think we all like that kind of validation, or just like, we're the ones telling about our experience. And I think the hard part with this, and he actually calls it the art of questioning, and from what I understand, the hard part is not answering, like Gwen was saying. So a kid says, what is this? You know what it is, and not just saying that's a beetle. Instead, asking a question to make them figure it out. And I just after Gwen talked about this, I went home and did it with my 2.5-year-old, and it was amazing. Like, we heard a woodpecker, and he was like, what is that? I saw it. I was like, so hard not to tell him it was woodpecker. It's really actually hard not to give him the answer. But I was like, I don't know. What do you think that is? And he couldn't even see it at that point. But we spent 20 minutes with a 2.5-year-old watching this woodpecker. I never even told him what he was doing. And in that 20 minutes, he was thinking like, oh, he's looking for food. Like, underneath the name.
Yeah,
right?
he
So
didn't
it's like you didn't even need to
Mhm.
conclude that it's a woodpecker.
And that's one of the things that was really interesting too, is like when kids ask you questions, they're actually not even wanting the answer. They're just wanting you to engage with them. That's just the way that people learn to communicate with each other. And so it's just really a method of saying like, hey, pay attention to me. And if you can get that attention to them and ask them those questions, you're gonna have a much better mentoring experience. So we can talk about questions and stuff, but I guess what I want to say just to end this is that, you know, I think children, humans have like these innate longings in life, and they can manifest themselves in the outdoors and in nature. It's just it just happens, and it's your job to figure out what those longings are and to feed them. That's your job. So. Thank you so much.
Just one other plug too. On your thumb drive,
Oh yeah, we're gonna do that. Sorry.
Angela put, right? Okay.
Yeah, the John Young.
Yeah.
I put some John Young audio files. He's the Wilderness Awareness School Nature Coyote Mentoring Guide. They're just some select few audio files that are like really freaking inspirational and awesome to learn about the philosophy and how to be that for yourself too.
So we got those from Feed on the Earth, which is another organization that's local, and John Young said that they could have all of those files and that we could share them with you. So we have permission to do that, and we actually have his whole audio collection, which is so amazing. If you want to learn how to tell a story, it's miraculous. Like I have them on audiobooks in my car, and I can have like the worst day ever and get in my car, and within 3 minutes I'm like, what happened next? And then what happened? And then what happened? You know, and he's just got you by the like the fish on the line. You know, it's amazing. He's a real like miracle of a storyteller, and like Oak was doing this since he was a tiny kid with his mentor Tom Brown, who was another famous tracker and awesome wilderness dude. And Tom Brown mentored with, what's his name? Thank you, Stalking Wolf, who was a Native American dude who grew up as a tracker in his tribe. Like it's this legacy that's passed down from these different people, and have put this information together in this package that's called Coyote Mentoring. But it's not this brainchild of just John Young, though I'm completely infatuated with him. It's this product of multiple really aware, connected people saying, how do these kids end up being so awesome? How did I learn any of this? And putting these best practices together in a way that really fits. And those tracks, really, really listen to them. If you want the whole thing, just come back and show up, and we'll stick it on the thumb drive for you. We'll get it to you if you have the motivation that you want to listen to it. It has completely changed my personal teaching world and my own relationship with nature. It's amazing stuff.
And the book itself, I didn't bring it with me, but it's really easy to read, and I mean it's kind of dense, I guess, but I was really excited about it. So, but I feel like it goes through like basically it goes through all of these things, and it just makes so much sense. And then the whole back end of it is all activities. So it's actual things that you could do, and they always start with a story, and so it's like how to introduce the activity and what to do if there